How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the UKnowAdamTsang podcast, where you get to know a little bit more about people, passions, and all things business. Today, I'm sitting across the table from Bryan Richard.
That's right.
Who is an instructor at the Ogeechee Technical College. He is the culinary instructor.
That's right.
And welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate
Absolutely. Excited to have you here. Food is something that's very, very dear to my heart. I have two different restaurants. I grew up in restaurants, and to be sitting across from a chef like yourself, I'm super excited to kind of like get into your story, figure out, where you came from, and honestly, the state of the industry, if I
Sure.
want to be quite honest. So I guess let's start by kind of how did you end up at Ogeechee Tech?
Well, how far do we want to go back?
As far as you like. From the beginning.
I grew up. I think one of the first things that I wanted to do, I had this, as a kid, I think like most young boys, you want to be a policeman, fireman, something like that. I wanted to be a fireman and a baker, which would be a pretty cool combination.
Okay.
So I always, working with my mom, grandmothers, things like this, had that little passion for food, even when I was really young. About to graduate high school, I wanted to go to culinary school. Kind of an interesting little thing that happened. All of my friends going to like regular 4-year universities for a variety of things. So I'm growing up outside of Philadelphia, so going to Temple, going to Penn State, going to Villanova, these schools in the area, and I got sucked into that. I made the mistake, I don't know if it was a mistake, but where I initially put culinary to the side, thought I'm going to go into political science of all things, right? Maybe that was the mistake. Year and a half into this, miserable, right? Grades weren't that great because I wasn't really into. I enjoyed American history and civics and things like this, but why did I go into political science? I'm going to make a change. Tell my parents, look, I'm dropping out of school. They sort of freaked out a little bit right away.
Okay.
But
this
I
is
said,
a year or 2 years in?
Year and a half into
Year
a
and a half
4-year
in, okay.
university in Pennsylvania. I say, I'm going to go to culinary school. Right away, they were like, of course. So went to culinary school outside of Philadelphia, a school called the Restaurant School at Walnut Hill College, and worked around southeastern Pennsylvania for a number of years and made the decision to move south.
So you finished your culinary degree?
Finished culinary, graduated, and then I worked 3 or 4 different places in that. So a couple of years. I was working in the industry in Pennsylvania for a couple of years. Moved down to Savannah, and this is now 20 years. So June will be the 20th anniversary, 20 years that I've been in Savannah.
So a few things kind of like, stand out to me. One of the things being making that leap. You said a lot about expectations. Everybody's expected to go to a 4-year college. Everybody's expected to, go into a specific degree or school of whatever that is. Like they're expected to make that decision to go to a 4-year college. So for you had a moment in there where you said that, hey, this isn't me.
That's right.
And can you tell me about how did you decide that? Because I'm sure some of the audience are working through maybe something very similar of like, what do I want to do with my life? So take me to that moment in time.
Yeah, I decided to make a change. I knew that culinary was the direction that I wanted. I had never worked in the industry before, so I think that maybe had something to do with it. It was like, well, I never worked in a restaurant. For me to go to school, maybe, I'm not quite sure. That pressure, of course, of just following everybody else, going to that 4-year school. It was the fact that I knew I was passionate about something. I knew I was into food. I knew what food could provide, bringing people together. For example, you could sit down with anybody and have a meal. You could cook for anybody and have them enjoy the meal that you're providing for them. So even as a young college kid, it was like I wasn't seeing that in the career path I chose, at least in college. whether it's political science or whether it's business or anything, some of the industries out there don't provide you with that kind of passion of providing for people. And yeah, I think knowing that I could do something that I was passionate about, make a career out of it, and I had grown my whole life enjoying doing this, at least as a family, I wanted to make that leap, into culinary.
So can you recall a time when did you cook for your dorm mates? Were you always just like making food for yourself? Like, were you spending more time in the kitchen than you were spending like?
I think it was more for myself, and I also think, I guess I could have used it a little better in college. I can recall, the sink, the kitchen areas, as you would expect, maybe a young or a group of young male college students. Dishes weren't being done, trash wasn't being taken out, piles of, and then it ends up being takeout boxes stacked up. I probably could have stepped in there and said, hey guys, look, here's what we need to do. But, I think I was still trying to figure out, well, wait a minute, yes, is this what I want to do? Or is this, political science class that's kicking my butt? Is that kind of what I'm really into or something like that?
When you went to culinary school, did you feel like you had found it? Did you feel like that shift in maybe your energy, or describe what that was like?
Yeah, I think right away, you just know, and it's interesting, my first thought is, as I think of myself then, I think of students that I see sometimes. You have students that come in, and you can kind of see it in their eye that they get it, It's not like I went in there and I just knew everything and I could just slice and dice and cook and saute, grill, bake breads, all of these things. I wouldn't have needed to go to school if that was the case. But I at least had that kind of internal desire to want to learn about that particular subject. And the great thing about the school I went to, similar to Ogeechee Tech, there was just, a broad spectrum of people. Folks that had retired, particularly when I went, there was a group, I think they had closed down one of the shipbuilding facilities outside of Philadelphia. So we had all these older shipbuilders, older guys that coming in and they're like, yeah, let's try out culinary, all the way to people like me who were maybe a couple years out of high school or even younger, just out of high school. And it was great to be in that atmosphere that everybody had their goal set on culinary, which I had been into my whole life. So now that I finally made that jump, it wasn't work. It wasn't that hard. It was going to school, doing what I wanted to do. Even though there was, there's nutrition, there's business, there's the science and the math of it, that was still fun because it ultimately dealt with what I was into, And so I think had I been exposed to working in the industry, had I been exposed to somewhat to see what culinary school would be like, I probably would have said to all my friends that are going to four-year schools and just doing that sort of typical college thing, no, this is what it's all about for me. And because once I saw it, I was like, what did I waste a year and a half for trying to learn about, the science of politics of all things or whatever the case may be.
That's right. So take me through, you've honestly finished school at the point of the next step, and you decide to step into the industry. And I think that this is very important just because, there is a somewhat of a disconnect between what happens in school and what happens in a restaurant, right?
Right.
What was, for you, kind of like, can you recall any interesting stories of, when you stepped onto the line and your first day and what that felt like?
Yeah, so it is very much, it's sort of like minor leagues and major leagues.
Okay.
You can even go beyond that, though, where, you're very much working in this sterile environment, figuratively. I guess to some degree, literally sterile as in clean, but this environment where you're in class everything is kind of given to you. You have always nonstop, me as an instructor, right next to you. Before you burn something, I'm there to keep you from burning it, and then explaining what would have happened, right? For example, you have people that are there paying to come to school to learn, so the attitudes are a little bit different than I think in the industry, and the pace is much slower. You might have a task to complete, cooking a certain dish, but you might have 2 hours to complete that task. You very rarely have 2 hours in the industry. If you have 2 hours, you're doing 100 different things. So you have that environment in education, in culinary education, and then outside of that, when you're going to work, and as we do at Ogeechee Tech, we had an internship. So while we were going, usually right around the time that we were about finished with our classes, we were required to do an internship. So we had to work in the industry. And so that was my first opportunity to see that much more fast-paced. Working with people that are not brand new as a student, I'm in there, I'm like everybody else. Whether I was a shipbuilder or I'm a high school student, we're all in culinary together for the very first time. So at the same time I'm struggling with cutting an onion, the person next to me is struggling cutting with an onion. Going into this major leagues now, I'm expected to be able to cut an onion and cook this and cook that, put these dishes together, and do it very quickly.
Under pressure.
And you have these veterans now, they've been doing it their whole life. And so it was hard to sort of pick up and learn that new style, because as you're watching these veterans, they have learned all the tricks. They have learned the way around the kitchen. They've learned that they can put this in the oven, that on the stove, and this on the grill at the same time, and they just have that sense to know when to check the oven, when to go to the stove, when to go to the grill. And for me, I'm putting something as a new cook, I'm putting something on the grill, and I'm sitting there and I'm staring at it and waiting for
watching it cook.
Exactly. It's interesting because I see students that do that too.
Sure.
I have to remind them, you don't have to stir that all the time. Come over, stir it, give it a little look, and then go do other things. But in their mind, they're focused on that tomato sauce, and that's it. And in the industry, you can't do that. So I can recall, if we were to talk about stories in the industry, it's amazing. I think it comes back to the diversity, but of all the crazy things that you come across, I keep kind of commenting about these shipbuilders, but it ends up being kind of these older, in age, line cooks that probably had 10 or 15 other careers prior to food service, and they're just kind of old and weathered, and they really don't care about what's going on. They've got this chef who's probably a third of their age, who I'm coming in as a new cook looking up to, like, this guy's a magician. Look at what he can do. And you've got these older veterans that, like, I've been cooking since you were in you were in diapers, kind of a thing. And just some of the kind of things that come up, but it's those older guys that are the ones that kind of give you the little extra knowledge. When this goes in the oven, go ahead and put this on over here, and then they're both done at the same time, whatever that might be. Whereas often the kind of book-trained chef knows you follow the procedures 1, 2, and 3, and sometimes that's not the case.
And how do you overcome that? Is that something that do you think there needs to be more of a focus on that in school, right? Like creating pressure, because a lot of times, this would be someone's first job. Like I have plenty of people that are line cooks as their first job, and
right.
You have to kind of ingrain in them the fact that, hey, you need to be able to multitask. Is that something that you train in the programs that you're a part of?
We have certain classes that we involve what we call live work, where our students produce food that is then sold, generally within the campus itself, that provides them the opportunity to make food, typically at a faster pace, and whether we're selling baked goods or we're selling like a boxed lunch we just did recently, the little kind of sandwich sale, sandwich salad type of thing, or we actually have a sit-down lunch.
Which
you
I
come to
love.
join-
I want to really hit on that point. There is this luncheon, I think you guys call it.
Yeah, culinary luncheons, we focus them on two specific courses. One is called Contemporary Cuisine, where the kitchen side produces the menus and the food, and then we have a restaurant operations, which teaches about the front of the house management, the service side of it. And so we have the students in the service side serving the guests, and then we have the students in the kitchen cooking and plating for the guests. As far as a class specifically, that's as close as we can get to that kind of realistic, real life situation. However, that being said, typically in a restaurant setting, these luncheons could be kind of covered by 2 or 3 people. You might have one server that could handle all of those tables, and then you have a couple of people in the kitchen that could handle that. We're looking at maybe, ideally, 5 or 6 students, and we're in the front of the house, and then that, say, 5 or 6 in the kitchen. Because of their lack of experience, to do these things as quickly as they need to, we don't want them to be, serving food that's done incorrectly, whatever the case may be. The biggest thing to kind of go back and I guess answer of adding that in is just that experience. Fortunately, that's where the internship comes in as far as the education is concerned, but the downside is that restaurant owners like you are getting the interns that are coming to you for that fast-paced experience. So it's sort of like, to some degree, throwing them in the fire.
Sure.
I have some knife skills. I know some methods of cooking, and I can handle a grill.
Safety
I can
procedures.
do these types of things. They know about cleaning and sanitizing, but they just can't do it over and over and over again, quickly, and then do it hour after hour, and then come in the next day, do it over again. That's where the internship comes into play.
Yeah, so I agree with you, but hitting on that same opportunity, Ogeechee Tech has done an amazing job in terms of setting up this program where people like myself, people of Statesboro, can go there, sit down, and give the students like an experience, right? And it's very controlled. You don't have a ton of variables. You're not going to be hit with like a 10 top, 20 people coming in.
That's
Because
right.
everything is kind of like scheduled. Everything is very kind of like systematic.
Yeah.
And the students get to experience. And so like, I've brought on multiple people from that program. And I think that they do have the core knowledge of being able to kind of like execute in the kitchen. What about like the current state of the industry, in your opinion? I don't know how many friends you have kind of like in the restaurant. I would imagine a ton. But it's difficult to place people right now. I'm having issues like finding people that are motivated to work.
Yeah, so our industry in particular is in a particular spot, given this past year with a lot of stores, but restaurants specifically closing, and then having to follow certain guidelines of only having 25% capacity, then 50, and I think we're able to at least throughout Georgia, maybe not every municipality, but we're able to be open 100%. We had to lose a lot of that staff, and some of them are going elsewhere. Some of them, collecting unemployment. It's difficult to get them back into an industry like ours because of the demand of coming in, working hard, nonstop for a number of hours, and doing it over and over and over again. Where's the passion that we have in these folks that we're looking for seem to have gotten lost in this shuffle of, I'm certainly not going to blame COVID for the lack of passion, but it seems like it got lost somewhere, and people are needing to refine that.
Well, tell me about this. So, when you were working in the industry back in the day, did you guys experience the same thing? Has labor always been an issue for restaurants?
Yeah, food service turnover is incredible. A couple of reasons. One, somebody like me getting experience. I had my eyes set on moving up the ladder. And so I'm going to work somewhere. I'm going to do the best I can. I might start out, low man on the totem pole, so to speak, but for us, typically cold station salads, right? I'm doing really, really well. The chef sees that. Okay, we're going to move you over to the grill, move over to saute. Now you're kitchen manager, something like that. Ultimately, there's going to be somebody else looking or needing a spot at a higher position, potentially higher pay, something like that. For us in this industry, pay is not necessarily all that it's about, although I can certainly touch on pay here in a second. But I'm working, I'm comfortable. I know Soy Yummy. I've got kind of a couple of stations down, for example. For me to learn and get the diversity that I need in this industry, I'm going to move down the street to go to another restaurant. I'm making the same, maybe making less, seeing a different way of doing things at this other restaurant. I'm going to go to another restaurant, and I'm going to do the same thing. By the time I'm done, I hopefully have moved up the ladder, and I'm not in the same position I was at my first place I worked. But now I've got all of this experience. I worked with all of these people, all of these owners, all of these chefs. I've learned their little ins and outs of things. Now I can do my own thing, sort of thing, right? And so we find partly our good employees are moving to another place and then moving somewhere else, that turnover, so that they can kind of, fill their knowledge,
So as a restaurant owner, how do I combat that?
So I'll talk about pay. Pay is a big thing in our industry, where if we know throughout town here that restaurant A is going to pay, $10 an hour, but restaurant B is going to pay $11 an hour, those who are not in that same path that I was talking about are going to, for no other reason other than that extra dollar, 50 cents perhaps, go to restaurant B. They're at restaurant B, restaurant C, they see is, I don't know, whatever, 11 and a quarter. It's more of that kind of just, they don't have the passion for the industry. They just want to do a job that they're good at. They happen to be, good in a kitchen, and they want to make some money. I think partially our issue of employees coming back is that we're an industry that tends to not pay very well, right? We are an industry that we have to just be right on the line with our finances. We're buying a lot of product. We're buying a lot of food. We're buying, some restaurants alcohol, for example, and those beef tenderloins and that shrimp and that fresh fish is very expensive. And so for us, we have to spend a lot of money just to keep that inventory in our restaurant. We can't charge an arm and a leg for it because our customers aren't going to come and spend a ton of money for this really good quality food. So we have that balance. We're buying great product. We're trying not to charge our customers too much. And then we're left with that, that payroll that we need to pay our staff. And we're already teetering. So we tend to find restaurants are not the highest paying jobs that are available. So I think it comes into play, even kind of coming and staying, is if an employee who has probably worked in food service before is going to come back into their $7 and a quarter, $8 an hour job, they're probably going to look to find who else has that $10, $11 an hour job. Forget about food service. I'm going to go into that position.
So all you're saying is basically pay more.
Not directly, but it's sort of like you would have more customers that would come in if your prices were a little bit lower. I'm saying sure. You as in if restaurants' prices were a little bit cheaper to a certain limit. I mean, if you come in and you're getting a filet mignon and they're charging $5, the customer would think you're crazy, that there's something wrong with that beef.
Sure.
So we have that fine line of making everybody happy. Ownership's got to be happy, employees got to be happy, and our customers have to be happy. And in the sense of the discussion as it is now, we're talking about the finances. The customers want great value. The owner wants
margin
to have as much coming back as or much left over as possible.
Sure.
And then you have the employees here, and it is a great balancing act to get all of those absolutely correct. And so, yes, I think if restaurants we're not quite post-COVID, were to reopen and just, we're going to give everybody $20 an hour or something like that, you're going to go out of business. I mean,
Yeah,
it's not
I
going
mean,
to be possible.
it has to get passed on to someone, right?
So
And
I think
I think that, you know, even with, you know, inflation, that in my opinion, it's coming, right? Like
Yep.
there's been so much money that's been dumped into the economy that it's bound to happen. And so, you know, as the prices of everything goes up, I mean, somebody has to pick up the bill, you know.
That's right.
And so I think there's going to be some interesting times ahead of us. Have you seen a period of time like this before?
I don't recall that. And I think as far as on the managerial side, that sort of scenario of being the manager and being in between paying employees and paying the owner, so to speak, not really paying, but you know, meeting my margins, is never ending. But I think of myself personally, money is an issue. You have to pay the rent. But I think I personally always had my eyes on kind of moving up and satisfying myself professionally. So then the question is, okay, we know we can only do so much with money. We know we have the employment available for them. Where do we get that passion in these employees that are coming into the industry so that they come, even if they're just prepping, even if they're just maybe washing dishes and prepping, how do we get them to want to wash dishes, prep, and then maybe make some salads, maybe make some desserts, and want that passion that I had while I was watching, you know, cooking shows Saturday mornings instead of cartoons as a young kid.
So one of the things that I've done is I try to pour into my employees. And so, you know, for example, I am constantly thinking of ways to improve.
Yeah.
And really, in my opinion, it's not so much that I want my team members to be, you know, automated or robots or anything like that. I want them to think. I really
Right.
do. I want them, and I tell them all the time, is like, I want to be able to come back to the station and you come up with, hey, like, this is the better way to do this. Because I think that there's a ton of value in that aspect of being able to come up with those ideas and come up with like processes and come up with the necessary things that that need to do. Because if you come to a job and all your responsibility is to, I want to say flip burgers, but like just turn the burger over and over again, over time, I mean, anybody's going to become aggravated, right? Or unsatisfied with what they're doing. I think that one thing that I try to do with my team members is always give as much knowledge and as much skills as I can, so that they can take something away. Because like at the end of the day, like I understand that over time, like of course they're going to leave. I mean, you know, I can't expect anybody to stay in that position for a very long time. But it is definitely something that is a part of this industry, and how you combat that is very interesting. One of the things that you stand in a very interesting position, just because there are no other culinary programs around in the area.
Right.
There's one of the few, if not the only one. And as a town, Statesboro is not really known as much for its culinary cuisine, like, you know, specialized mom and pops. For whatever reason, the audience here is really geared towards more of the box chains, I think they call them.
Yeah, chains, fast casual, you know.
So like for me, as someone who is very much in that field of like trying to push and diversify, I guess, the food landscape of Statesboro, you know, I have to ask you, like, how can I do a better job? What can I do to kind of like help?
Right. So once you have established good quality restaurants, more good that are successful, more good quality restaurants come in, and I think that's been at least, you know, my time at Ogeechee Tech. It seems like we'll go through a phase where we'll get some of these newer independent, better quality restaurants, and they tend to not last. And what we need is for them to last, and then more to come, those to last, and then all of a sudden we end up being this sort of restaurant destination. I'm not sure why. I think it's just the clientele are unsure of what they're going to get when they go to a particular restaurant, whereas going to the box chains, they know it's going to be the same here or in Chicago, let's
Well,
say.
the
Right?
consistency is there.
Right. And so by adding that, we'll just, draws more in. And I think that's the trouble that we find with graduating students. There are a couple of restaurants that students will go to and have some success. The issue that we have is those students that I think, I'm not saying that all students that graduate that are really just fantastic students move elsewhere, but we have a good number of students that just leave the area. Savannah would be a
And
a
how do we
great
keep
example.
them here?
Having that option for them that somewhere like Savannah, somewhere like Charleston has, in that, new contemporary, modern cooking techniques, trendy menus that draw customers in, I think is kind of what we're missing here, at least a good depth of them, right? And so if a student graduates and they have a choice of working at 1 to 3 kind of places that might fit that need here in Statesboro, they can go to Savannah and have dozens of options.
That's right.
Or beyond that and have, more than that.
And I think the demand for, culinary students is so high everywhere, right? Like the
Right.
demand for labor is so high that, it makes more sense to a certain extent for them to leave the area. And I
Right.
think that's one of the challenges because, I'd love to hold on to, students that are coming through a culinary program, give them the opportunity to potentially grow.
Yeah.
But oftentimes it's so hard. It is because it depends on what sells, right? Like we don't have it's not a food mecca,
Right.
and it's not a destination where people are going out to eat. Oh man, eat something. Let me go somewhere where I can eat something I've never eaten before. And it's crazy because the same people that are in Statesboro will drive down to Savannah to do that, and they're willing to spend there.
Yeah.
Right, and maybe it's because of the historical, bricks that are everywhere. I can bring some historical
get
bricks
bricks here,
and
yeah.
put them around, around the restaurant to see how that does. But it's fascinating. It's definitely a challenge to do that. For you in terms of where we're at right now, where are we in the trend? Are we moving towards like a better direction? Do you think that we are moving in the wrong direction? What would you say in terms of like the landscape of food in Statesboro?
So our last year has been kind of just, any progress that we've had, and I think we were kind of getting into that where there had been a couple of newer places that were beginning to get established. This whole last year was kind of thrown out the window, and everybody's kind of having to start over. So does that mean, once we have a solid year or so of business being open, people more freely going out to eat, customers, going out to eat, does that mean that a year from now we'll be back to where we were, March of 2020? I think probably it is yet to be seen. As far as our side of it, as far as culinary students, we're certainly on an uptick. This past year, due to things that were out of our control, we saw a drop in our enrollment. And so as long as we're, able to have more students to then put back into the industry here locally, I can't see why that wouldn't benefit things. So it's interesting how we're kind of part of that kind of roller coaster as well, that we're seeing our enrollment down as restaurants are sort of not really opened, or they're open only partially, these types of things. And so if I'm looking at what I'm going to have available as far as students to put back into the market, a year from now, 2 years from now, is going to be completely different than what it has been, say for this last year.
So this next, semester, so you guys run on the quarter system or semesters?
We're semesters. We have two 15-week semesters, and then we're about to start May 17th. We'll start our 10-week summer semester. So we're not closed during the summer. We have summer classes that we offer.
Is that good or bad for you?
It's good I'm fine. It keeps us kind of going. The classes are typically a little different because it's only 10 weeks. Some of the classes we can't teach in the summer because students would be with us, 20 or more hours a week. And so we save those for the longer terms. Yeah, I don't know what I would do if today, for example, is our last day of classes for the spring. If we had all summer and we didn't have class again until August, that's a little much. That also opens the door for students to say, well, I've been away for 2 months, maybe I'm not going to come back or something. Just like if a restaurant closed for X amount of weeks, you wouldn't have the same staff to come back. Yeah.
That's right. For you, what is your message that you'd like to get out to the world or to the audience?
About culinary or about
just in general?
Yeah, I think if we were kind of most of the focus is on this industry and our ability, any business. It's something about, and this perhaps could help in you or other restaurant owners in keeping staff, is your businesses should very much be like an oyster, right? When your staff comes in, everybody's inside that oyster shell. The oyster shell's closed. It's nice and warm. It's comfortable inside, and you don't want to step outside of that because you don't know what's outside of here. So to make that happen, you've got leaders that are within consistency. You've got this. You were talking about mentoring and kind of teaching new things, but you've got that ability to mentor and coach people in your business rather than them coming in, not being happy for whatever reason, and then just kind of pointing fingers. Hey, do this, and do this, or why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Rather than taking these opportunities to encourage them, motivate them. So, okay, they did something that was wrong. You're not going to reward them for that, but at least you have that opportunity that you can, again, being a part of this little family, this home inside this oyster shell, so to speak, let's see what we can do so this doesn't happen again and that they will improve. And so consistency and leadership come into play, and I think we often, in food service, we lack that sometimes, particularly when we're understaffed or we're under pressure. We get to yell and not take those opportunities to have that sort of encouragement. And so I'm saying all businesses, we want to have our staff feel like we're at home and have more encouragement. Food services is certainly one of those businesses that fits.
Yeah, and I completely agree. Bryan, thank you so much for stopping by the podcast. I really appreciate your time.
Great, appreciate it.
If there's anything I can do for you as usual, please let me know.
I'll do that.
And we'll go from there.
Great.
Cool? Thanks, man.
Thanks, Adam.